Almost nothing was known about this Nazi program until the early 1980s. The only relatively clear mention of the Lebensborn program was an article from Life magazine published in the summer of 1945, which told about the so-called miracle children of Lebensborn. However, the article, due to its openly hostile tone, was, as one would expect, recognized more as propaganda than actually a unique historical fact. If we add to this that just before the surrender of Germany, the Nazis destroyed most of the documents relating to the Lebensborn project, then there is nothing surprising in the fact that this project was simply forgotten under the avalanche of facts about the atrocities of Nazism that were revealed in the post-war trials. It wasn't until the 1975 that the public became interested in the so-called breeding program, an interest spurred by some published photographs and comments on them by professional researchers. The reasons for the origin of the Lebensborn program, nicknamed the Baby Factory, was that Hitler's Germany was in dire need of a constant renewal of its human resources. After the start of the war, the male population, which is natural, was dying and getting injured on the fronts, so Germany needed to maintain a high birth rate. With all the horrors of the Nazi regime, the propaganda of large families and their state support were built at a very high level, so a woman who gave birth to at least 4 children was awarded a Silver Parental Cross, which gave very extensive rights. For example, entry without waiting in line to any store or institution. When buying food, mothers of large families were required to provide the best and freshest products. In addition, mothers with many children had many other benefits, including financial support from the state, free travel, etc. However, even such unprecedented measures to support motherhood did not yield results. The head of the SS, Himmler himself, in one of his speeches said, "As for the value of our blood and the size of our population, we are dying out. We're here to lay the foundation for the next generation to create history." These very foundations became the Lebensborn program. However, before its official adoption, Himmler again began to actively criticize the Catholic Church for condemning polygamy. On the contrary, the SS chief strongly supported the thesis that pure-blood Aryans not only could, but should also have extramarital relationships so that Germany would receive more and more new citizens. And if these citizens, even illegitimate, had pure-blooded Aryans as their parents, then the state was ready to have a hand in their upbringing as well. Perhaps it was despair over the difficult demographic situation that led Himmler personally order it. And it was not a request, but an order to all SS officers to have sexual relations with Aryan women at every opportunity. As a result of such policy, which is not surprising, it was the chief of the SS who prepared and approved the Lebensborn program, the implementation of which was the organization with the same name created in 1935. The essence of the program was as follows. The most healthy, pure-in-blood Aryan girls were selected throughout the country, and the so-called Lebensborn houses became a place for girls to meet with the most thoroughbred representatives of the Aryan race. Moreover, such dates could be held either by young people in love, brides, and even wives, or by order. In other words, any German girl who passed a medical commission, the so-called selection for purity of blood, could become a patient of the Lebensborn maternity hospital, where in the end she became pregnant and then gave birth. All patients of maternity hospital received first-class medical care for those times, food, living conditions, and even ideological indoctrination. The motto, "Give birth to the Führer," was the most important in the network of maternity hospitals Lebensborn. By the way, German women who were carrying children conceived by a German also often stayed in such hospitals. All patients, at their request, received complete confidentiality. This concerned, first of all, mothers of illegitimate children, as well as those who came to the Lebensborn house to become pregnant and give birth voluntarily. It should be noted that, as a rule, illegitimate children or children born by order soon found new families. The babies were sent there with new documents, and they, in general, never found out who their real parents were. In Germany, the Lebensborn program operated 17 maternity homes and 6 infant homes. After birth, each baby was carefully examined for the absence of pathologies and belonging to the Aryan race. and then, as mentioned above, either became a new member of a large family in case of official relations or ended up in a foster family. It must be said that for the German women who came to give birth by order, there were even relatively democratic rules. They could choose the man with whom they were going to conceive a child. Finally, no less surprising was the fact that such women were proud of their role, believing that in this way they were helping their native Germany. The head of the SS, Himmler himself, in one of his speeches said, "With every child born, she fights for the nation." And here an important fact should be noted. In fact, the lebensborn program was an attempt to raise the so-called super children, whose fathers were only specially selected men taller than 180 centimeters, or 70 inches, always fair-haired and blue-eyed. Almost the same requirements were applied to mothers. Both were checked against genealogical records up to the 1750s to rule out even potential kinship. After the candidates were selected and agreed upon, the inseminator got down to business. The first 3 nights he visited one girl, the next 3 another. On Sundays, an inseminator had a day off. The visits continued until the onset of conception. The conditions offered to women in labor were so good that by 1938 at least 8,000 babies were born in special maternity hospitals. By the way, any German family could also hand over a newborn to a maternity hospital, having previously provided all the necessary documents about the health, racial purity of the child, and so on. With the outbreak of World War II, lebensborn branches were also opened in the occupied countries. 3 maternity hospitals were opened in Poland, 1 in France, also 1 each in the Netherlands and Luxembourg, and 10 in Norway. This was due to the fact that there was a catastrophic shortage of pure German women. Therefore, in the occupied countries, healthy, fair-haired and blue-eyed girls were also given the opportunity to contribute to the strengthening of the Reich. It is funny that in this case, Hitler's propaganda was silent about the purity of Aryan blood, coming up with excuses that in the occupied countries there were so-called forgotten carriers of Aryanism. The born babies, before leaving the maternity hospital, underwent a rather specific rite of baptism, more similar to Celtic or even satanic rituals. The baptism itself took place under the Nazi flag, a portrait of the Führer and a burning torch. The person conducting the ceremony held a special SS dagger over the child and said the following so-called prayer. "We accept you into our community as part of the body. You will grow up under our protection and bring honor to your name, pride to your brotherhood, and enduring glory to your race." After such a procedure, it was believed that the baby forever became a faithful servant of the Reich. The total number of children born under the lebensborn program is unknown and impossible to establish. As mentioned earlier, most of the documents, including even the procedure for feeding babies, were destroyed when the anti-Hitler coalition troops approached. Some researchers claim that at least 9,200 children were born in total, but only pre-war data on 8,000 births refute this information. Only in Norway, according to some sources, at least 20,000 children were born from the Germans. In France, 85,000. In Denmark, about 700. It is quite difficult to determine which of them was born as part of the lebensborn program. It is known that only before the war and only in Norway at least 12,000 such babies were born. After the war, the fate of children born under the lebensborn program remained largely unknown. In Norway, the chief psychiatrist declared that a woman who slept with the Nazis and gave birth to children from them should be considered insane. Accordingly, they first tried to deport the children to Germany, and after the failure, they were either distributed to other families or simply sent to asylums. It was not until the 80s that the Prime Minister of Norway apologized to the surviving children and their mothers. By the way, one of the most famous babies of the lebensborn program is one of the vocalists of the ABBA group, Frida Lindstedt. Her mother, a Norwegian, gave birth to a German officer, Alfred Hayes, as part of the program. After the liberation of Norway, the girl fled from the persecution to Sweden, where later she became a member of one of the most popular groups in the world.